The wind screamed through the streets of Los Angeles like a blade wrapped in ice, tearing at everything in its path. The blizzard had come without warning, transforming the city into a landscape of white and shadow, reducing visibility to mere feet, turning even familiar corners into dangers. Sofia Sinclair stumbled through it with one eye swollen completely shut, the socket purple and black, a bruise the size of a fist covering half her face. Handprint marks wrapped around her throat in perfect finger-sized welts, 5 of them, dark as ink, the skin split and raw where nails had clawed. Blood still wet on her split lip, dripping slowly down her chin and disappearing into the fabric of her thin grey coat. She had $5 clutched in her frozen fist. Not $500. Not $50. $5. This was everything she had left in the world after 3 weeks of running, after sleeping in her car, after selling her phone, her laptop, her mother's watch. This was all that remained. The playground emerged through the white like a ghost, metal structures barely visible through the whiteout. And there, beside the frozen swing set, a small girl stood alone. Emma Bianchi was 5 years old, too thin for her age, her white winter coat already soaked through, her lips turning blue as she cried so hard her entire body shook with each breath. She had been separated from her nanny only minutes ago when the whiteout hit, the woman's hand ripped away in the snow, panic rising, screaming a name that the wind had swallowed. Emma stood now in the empty cold, utterly alone, 9 blocks from her father's penthouse, 9 blocks from warmth, 9 blocks from safety. Sofia saw her and stopped moving. Something in her chest cracked open. She did not hesitate. She did not calculate the cost. She pulled off her own coat, the thin grey thing that was the only protection she had, and wrapped it around the child's shoulders, lifting her up, feeling the tiny body trembling like a bird caught in a cage. Emma's fingers locked around Sofia's neck, and Sofia began to walk. "I have you," Sofia whispered, her voice barely there, fractured like broken glass from the damage to her throat. "I have you now. You are not alone." 6 blocks through the whiteout. Her bare arms burning with cold, her legs moving on instinct, her mind focused only on the weight in her arms and the shallow breathing against her neck. The cold was absolute, cutting, merciless. Snow fell so thick it erased the world entirely. There were no cars, no people, just the roar of wind and the endless white. But ahead, through the haze, a rectangle of light appeared. The 24-hour laundromat on 5th and Maple, fluorescent and humming, open because its owner never closed it, because some places in the city ran 24 hours for the people who had nowhere else to go. Sofia pushed through the glass door and the warmth hit her like a physical thing, stealing her breath, making her legs nearly buckle. The laundromat was empty except for an old man reading a newspaper in the corner, barely looking up as she entered. Sofia carried Emma to the plastic chairs in the corner, away from the machines, away from the eyes, and sat down slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter something fundamental inside her. "What is your name?" Sofia asked softly, pulling Emma closer, trying to transfer warmth from her own body even though she had no warmth left to give. "Emma," the girl whispered. "I lost my nanny. Mama says never talk to strangers, but the wind was loud and I could not see and she was not there anymore and I was so cold." "Your nanny will find you," Sofia said, and she meant it with everything in her, though she knew it was likely a lie. People in the cold did not always get found. Sometimes they just disappeared into the white. But this child did not need to know that. This child needed to believe in rescue. "But until then, I am not a stranger. I am someone who is keeping you warm. That is not a stranger. That is a friend." She used her last $5 at the vending machine. $2.50 for hot chocolate. $2.50 for a bagel from the corner store clerk who looked at Sofia's face and said nothing but handed her an extra napkin for the blood still dripping from her lip. Sofia sat beside Emma through the long night, slowly moving the hot chocolate to the child's lips so she could drink it in small sips, breaking the bagel into pieces small enough for 5-year-old teeth to manage. She sang softly despite the pain in her throat, a lullaby her own mother had sung, each word scraping across damaged vocal cords but continuing anyway because this child needed something soft in a world that had become only hard things. The machines hummed around them. The fluorescent lights buzzed steadily. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault, wind howling against the glass, the world beyond the window a complete and absolute whiteout. Sofia did not know anything about Emma. She did not know about the penthouse on the 42nd floor. She did not know about the man who was, at that exact moment, 2 miles away in his climate-controlled office, watching security footage from a playground camera, watching a woman in a grey coat save a child from the snow. She did not know that Giovanni Bianchi controlled every underground poker room from downtown to Long Beach. She did not know that his network extended into every corrupt office, every police precinct, every bureaucratic machine in Los Angeles. She did not know that 200 men were already searching the city in the blizzard, moving through the white-like shadows, showing her photograph to every shelter, every hospital, every warm building with its lights on. She did not know that security footage from the playground had already been examined, her face already identified despite the bruises, her image already circulated. She did not know that in exactly 30 minutes, 15 black SUVs would pull up to the curb outside this laundromat, their engines cutting through the sound of the wind, their doors opening to reveal men in dark suits moving with the precision of a military operation. But before that moment came, there was just Sofia and Emma, and the warm hum of the laundromat, and a small child's fingers wrapped around a woman's hand with complete and total trust. Emma's eyes were closing now, exhaustion finally winning against fear. Sofia continued to hold her, continued to keep singing softly, continued to transfer whatever warmth she had left into this small body that had been lost in the snow. The old man in the corner turned a page of his newspaper and did not look up. The machine cycled through their endless rotations. Spin, rinse, repeat. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, 3 times, and steadied. Outside, the blizzard raged on, indifferent to the small mercy happening inside the glass walls. The clock on the wall above the dryers moved forward. Minutes became increments. The night grew deeper. And in a high-rise office in downtown Los Angeles, Giovanni Bianchi stared at a photograph printed on expensive paper. A woman with bruises covering her face, blood on her lip, her arm wrapped around a small child in a white coat. His daughter. His Emma. His precious, only child. And this woman, this stranger, this nobody from the streets, had saved her life in the snow. His dark eyes, the color of storm clouds, grew impossibly colder as he looked at the image. His jaw tightened. His fingers, bearing 3 heavy gold rings, slowly curled into a fist. He did not smile. He did not speak. He simply reached for his phone. Within minutes, 15 black SUVs would be mobilized. Within minutes, the laundromat would be surrounded. Within minutes, Sofia Sinclair's small, invisible existence would collide with the empire of Giovanni Bianchi in a way that neither of them could have imagined. But first, she had to wake from her sleep. First, she had to hear the sound of heavy engines cutting through the blizzard. First, she had to see the doors opening, the men stepping out into the snow, their suits impossibly expensive, their faces carved from stone. First, she had to look into Giovanni Bianchi's eyes and understand, for the first time in 3 weeks of running, that she might finally be safe. Or that she had just made everything infinitely more dangerous. But to understand how Sofia Sinclair arrived at this frozen playground, beaten and broken with only $5 to her name, we must go back. We must go back 3 weeks, to the night that changed everything, to the moment she made a choice that sealed her fate and marked her for death. We must go back to Douglas Hale's operation and the ledgers she stole, back to the network of victims and corruption, back to the moment she decided that staying alive was less important than exposing the truth. That is where our story truly begins. 3 months before the blizzard, Sofia Sinclair woke in the dark. Not the dark of night, but the dark of her room, a converted closet in the Morrison family's Beverly Hills mansion, barely wider than a coffin, with no window and a single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling like a small, dying star. She was 29 years old, but her hands looked 50. Calloused from scrubbing, lined from worry, trembling as she reached for her alarm clock on the plastic milk crate that served as her nightstand. For 53 in the morning. 7 minutes before the alarm would sound. She never needed the alarm. Her body had learned to wake itself, trained by 18 months of grief and 18 months before that of loving children who were not her own. Sofia pushed the narrow cot aside and dressed in the dark. Black pants. White blouse. The uniform that Mrs. Morrison had ordered 6 months ago, crisp and professional and deeply humiliating. As she buttoned the blouse, her fingers brushed the small gold locket hanging beneath, the only thing of value she still owned. Inside was a photograph of Michael, her husband, laughing at their wedding 7 years ago. His construction jacket was dusty. His smile was everything. She opened her closet door quietly and stepped into the hallway of the Morrison house. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Oil paintings of people who looked like they had never worried about money in their entire lives. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and wealth, a combination that had stopped making her feel like an intruder sometime around month 4. The kitchen was on the 2nd floor. She climbed the service stairs, not the grand staircase, never the grand staircase, and began her routine. Eggs first. She cracked 6 into a ceramic bowl, whisked them with mechanical precision. 2 for Tommy, who was 7 and hated texture. 2 for Lily, who was 5 and would only eat them if they were arranged in the shape of a smiley face. 2 for Marcus, who was 11 and barely spoke to her, who looked at her with the vague confusion of a teenager wondering why his parents employed a woman to raise him when they could just be parents. The toast needed to be cut into triangles, not squares. Mrs. Morrison had been very specific about that. Sofia had learned not to ask why. She had learned not to ask anything. She had learned that being a live-in nanny at $2,100 a month meant becoming invisible, a pair of hands that materialized when needed and dissolved when dismissed. By 6 o'clock, the children were at the kitchen table, still in their pajamas, backpacks waiting by the door. Tommy's eggs were already cold. Mrs. Morrison was particular about timing, but he ate them without complaint. Lily drew a smiley face with her orange juice on the marble countertop, and Sofia cleaned it before it could be seen. Marcus scrolled through his phone and said nothing. This had become normal. Everything had become normal. The school drive took 40 minutes through Los Angeles traffic, the children strapped into car seats and booster chairs that Sofia had learned to install correctly after watching YouTube videos at 1 in the morning. She dropped them at Westridge Academy, a private school that cost more per year than she had earned in the last 5 years combined. The headmaster knew her name but forgot it every time they saw each other. The house was quiet when she returned. Mrs. Morrison was at her Pilates class. Mr. Morrison was at his office, something in venture capital, something that had never been explained to Sofia and that she had learned not to ask about. She had 8 hours to clean, prepare dinner, organize the homework stations, do laundry, mend the ripped hem on Lily's school dress, and be ready to pick up the children at 3:30. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, visible only when necessary. The bathrooms first. She scrubbed the marble until it reflected light. The kitchen next. The dining room where the family rarely ate together. The living room where no one Saturday. By noon, she was exhausted in the way that only comes from invisible labor, the kind that leaves no evidence, no appreciation, no acknowledgement that she had even been there. Sofia prepared lunch for herself in the kitchen's corner, away from the main counter. A sandwich made from bread that was 3 days old and turkey that she had purchased herself, bringing groceries from the discount supermarket 2 blocks away. She ate standing up, 23 minutes while the bread was still soft enough to chew without pain. Then she washed the plate and put it away. It was during this moment, reaching for the cabinet above the refrigerator where she stored her own meager collection of things, that her hand touched something that did not belong there. A white envelope. Heavy stock. Expensive. The kind of envelope that bad news arrives in. Her stomach tightened as she opened it. The paper inside was folded in thirds. A notice. A final notice. Red letters stamped across the top like a scream. Final demand for payment. Outstanding medical debt. Account number 7724 Sinclair. Amount due, $125,000. Payment required within 7 days or criminal fraud charges will be filed. The paper trembled in her hands. Not from fear. She had become acquainted with fear 18 months ago when Michael stopped breathing in a hospital bed, when the machines around him began to sound like funeral bells, when she held his hand and watched his chest rise and fall for the last time. This trembling was something else. This was the moment when hope dies. This was the moment when the mountain becomes too steep and you realize you will never reach the summit. 7 days. $125,000. She earned $2,100 a month. Even if she had saved every penny, which she had not, because she had spent $200 of it every month on Michael's grave, on flowers that would die and need replacing, she would need 60 months. 5 years. And she had 7 days. She folded the letter and placed it inside her locket, against Michael's photograph, a perverse kind of togetherness. Then she returned to work, because stopping was not an option. At 3:30, she picked up the children. At 5 o'clock, she began preparing dinner. At 6, Mrs. Morrison returned from Pilates, flushed and satisfied, her designer gym bag slung over one shoulder. Her eyes passed over Sofia without seeing her. "The eggs were cold this morning," Mrs. Morrison said, directing the comment not to Sofia but to the open air, as if to an invisible witness. "I've told you, Sofia, timing is everything in this household." Sofia's jaw tightened. She had beaten the eggs to the table at exactly 6:25, the same time every morning, the same 5 minutes after Michael had always drunk his coffee, the same rhythm that had kept her breathing for 18 months. But she said nothing. She never said anything. "I will be more careful," she said quietly. That night, after the children were asleep, after she had cleaned the dinner dishes and prepared tomorrow's lunch boxes and laid out 3 sets of clothes for morning, Sofia sat on her narrow cot in the darkness and did the mathematics of desperation. She had $843 in her checking account. She had another $407 in a savings jar hidden under her bed. She had a car worth approximately $2,000, but if she sold it, she would have no way to drive the children to school and would lose her job the same day. She had nothing. 1 week later, she gathered the courage to ask. Mrs. Morrison was in the kitchen, drinking her morning coffee from a cup that cost more than Sofia's entire car. Sofia's heart was already breaking as she walked toward her. She had rehearsed the words 100 times in the privacy of her mind, and every rehearsal ended the same way, with doors slamming shut, with words that could not be unsaid, with consequences that would destroy what little remained. "Mrs. Morrison, Sofia began, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Morrison turned, her expression already closing, already defensive, as if the request was already being made and already being denied. "I needed to ask if it might be possible to receive an advance on my salary. Perhaps 6 months, or—" "Sofia, we pay you very fairly for the work you do," Mrs. Morrison interrupted, her voice taking on that sharp edge that meant the conversation was over. "This kind of request is inappropriate. This is not a personal loan service. This is a professional arrangement. I understand, You have 2 hours to pack your things and leave. You are not to say goodbye to the children. I will explain your departure in a way that they can understand. You will, of course, forego your final 2 weeks' pay to cover the cost of finding your replacement. I assume that is acceptable to you, given your current indiscretion." The words landed like bullets, each one finding its target. Sofia said nothing. She had learned that silence was the only response that sometimes allowed her to leave a room with her dignity intact, which was a small, worthless thing, but it was all she had. She packed the single cardboard box that contained her life. Michael's photograph. 1 change of clothes. A notebook where she had written poetry that no one would ever read. 7 pairs of underwear. 2 bras. The rejection letter from her application to go back to school, which she kept as a reminder of the price of hope. By the time Mrs. Morrison walked her to the door, Sofia had become a person she did not recognize. She had become nobody. A woman with no employment, no home, no future, and no way to pay for the death of her husband. The afternoon sun was hot on her face as she stood on the sidewalk outside the Morrison mansion, her single cardboard box in her arms, her car keys in her pocket, the debt collector's letter burning like a coal inside her locket. 3 weeks later, she would meet Douglas Hale. It happened at a rest stop parking lot behind a grocery store, the kind of place where women in cars slept because they had nowhere else to go. Sofia was parked between a rusted pickup and a minivan with an expired registration sticker. She was asleep in the back seat, her cardboard box serving as a pillow, when a tap on the window jolted her awake. A man. 52 years old. Silver-haired, cut expensively. A suit that probably cost $3,000. He was smiling, a warm smile, the kind of smile that suggested he understood suffering, that he had overcome it himself. "You look like you could use some help," he said when she rolled down the window, hand trembling on the button. His name was Douglas Hale. He needed a live-in caregiver for elderly clients. $5,000 a month. Room and board included. He had a contract right there in his briefcase, written by a lawyer, professional and clean. Sofia signed it in his warm office while sipping coffee he had brought her personally, the kind of small kindness that had become rarer than diamonds in her new life. She did not notice the cameras in the corners of the ceiling. She did not notice the two-way mirror on the far wall, or the woman standing behind it, Margaret Harrington, draped in pearls like she was draped in righteousness, watching with eyes that had learned to see women as inventory. 2 days later, Sofia discovered the locks on the bedroom doors were on the outside. She found 7 other women in the basement. She found the laptop with the encrypted files. She found the names and the locations and the photographs of women who had disappeared. She understood, with a clarity that felt like a blade through her chest, that she had made a choice that sealed her fate. That night, she ran. The rain came suddenly, hours after she fled the house with nothing but the laptop and the clothes on her back. Then came the snow, unnatural for Los Angeles in March, impossible and blinding and absolute. She made it as far as the playground near St. Augustine's when she heard the engines. For black SUVs approaching. Men stepping out into the snow. And Sofia, bleeding and broken and shaking, understood that she had nowhere left to run. Sofia's eyes flutter open to the hum of industrial dryers and the smell of stale detergent mixed with something sweeter, hot chocolate cooling in a foam cup beside her. The laundromat is nearly empty at dawn, just the two of them and a man in the corner reading a newspaper he cannot afford to buy. Emma is curled against Sofia's chest, her small body rising and falling with sleep, one hand twisted into Sofia's torn jacket. Sofia's left eye is swollen completely shut now, the skin around it deep purple bleeding into yellow. Her lip has split open again from the cold, and dried blood marks a line down her chin like a scar that hasn't finished forming yet. She looks down at the child and something in her chest breaks open wider than any of her visible wounds. The sound comes first. Before anything else, engines rumbling through the pre-dawn silence like distant thunder rolling closer. Sofia's body goes rigid. 4 engines. No, 5. The pitch is wrong, too heavy, too coordinated. Her fingers tighten around Emma instinctively. Through the laundromat window, shapes emerge from the blizzard. Black SUVs, massive and gleaming, pulling up to the curb in perfect formation. One after another, like a military operation conducted in slow motion. Men step out, at least 40 of them, dressed identically in long black wool coats, suits beneath, moving with the kind of precision that comes from training, from hierarchy, from understanding exactly what each body is supposed to do. Sofia stands, Emma still in her arms, backing toward the rear exit. Her legs are shaking so badly she's not sure they'll hold her weight. She's made it 3 steps when the door opens. Giovanni Bianchi walks through first. He is 6'3", broad-shouldered in a way that suggests old money mixed with old violence. His coat costs more than Sofia earned in a year, black wool so fine it catches the fluorescent light like oil on water, a $10,000 piece of fabric draped across shoulders that have carried empires. His hair is dark, almost black, silvered at the temples with distinguished gray that most men his age pay surgeons to prevent, and he simply carries like something earned. But it's his face that stops her, the scar running from his left eyebrow down to his cheekbone, thin and white and precise, as if drawn by a surgeon rather than violence. His eyes are the color of a storm before it breaks. He freezes when he sees Emma safe in Sofia's arms. The moment stretches. The fluorescent lights hum. A dryer tumble somewhere in the back, the sound almost obscene in the silence. Emma. His voice is deep, solid like an oath sworn in a church. Like venom. Like thunder recorded and released slowly through speakers in a small space. Emma jolts awake at the sound, looks up at the tall man in the expensive coat, and her small face dissolves into tears. She thrashes from Sofia's arms and runs toward Giovanni, her 5-year-old legs pumping, her voice high and fractured with relief. Papa, the storm was so scary, but this lady saved me. She saved me and she was hurt, but she stayed with me, Anne. Giovanni kneels. The most dangerous man in Los Angeles drops to one knee on the sticky linoleum floor of a laundromat and pulls his daughter into his chest. He buries his face in her dark curls, and for 10 seconds, he is not a crime lord or an empire builder or a man with blood on his hands. He is just a father who thought he had lost something irreplaceable and discovers that it has been returned. His hands shake as they move across her back, checking for injuries that aren't there. Then his eyes open and he sees Sofia. Really sees her. The way she's trembling so violently her teeth are chattering. The bruises on her throat in the shape of hands. Her left eye swollen closed. Blood dried and crusted on her split lip. The way she's trying to stand straight but her body is folded inward, protecting injuries he can sense even without seeing them. He stands, keeping Emma on his hip, and his expression hardens into something cold and final. Who did this to you? His voice has changed. It's no longer directed at a small child. It's a question asked to someone who has become, in the last 30 seconds, the most important variable in his world. Sofia opens her mouth but no words come. She's trapped between the instinct to run and the knowledge that running is impossible. Behind Giovanni, 2 more men have entered. Rocco, his head of security, built like a tank with a shaved head and neck tattoos wrapping up his throat like ivy, and Dario, lean and sharp-eyed with wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face that looks comfortable with numbers and violence in equal measure. I can't, Sofia whispers. If they find me, if they know I'm here. Her eyes roll back and the world tilts sideways. Her legs give out with the gentle collapse of something that has finally run out of fuel. Giovanni moves faster than someone his size should be able to move. He catches her before she hits the ground, his large hand supporting the back of her head, his other arm sliding under her knees. She weighs almost nothing in his grip. He can feel her ribs through her jacket, can count them with the pressure of his fingers. He speaks without looking at his men, his voice dropping to a register that sounds like it comes from somewhere deep in the earth. Get her to the compound. Get Dr. Reyes. I want her treated for everything. Get her X-rays, MRI, blood work. Find out everything, every injury, every scar, every mark. I want to know what she survived. He pauses, and when he continues, his voice becomes something sharper. Find out who did this. I want names, addresses, photographs, bank accounts. I want to know what they had for breakfast. Rocco moves to lift Sofia from Giovanni's arms, but Giovanni steps back slightly, keeping her against his chest. No. I'll take her. He looks at his daughter, still clinging to his neck. Emma, we're going home. We're going to help this lady feel better. As they move toward the door, as Rocco and Dario and a dozen other men fall into formation around them, Dario steps closer to Giovanni's ear. His voice is barely audible. Boss, street cameras caught her face 3 weeks ago. She appeared on a trafficking watch list flagged by the FBI. Douglas Hale's operation. The network you flagged for investigation. Giovanni's jaw tightens. He doesn't slow his pace. Sofia is already unconscious against his shoulder, completely unaware that the man carrying her toward safety has just classified her situation as an act of war. Then Douglas Hale just made the last mistake of his life. The convoy moves through the blizzard, black SUVs cutting through the snow like sharks through white water. Inside the lead vehicle, Sofia lies across the back seat, wrapped in Giovanni's own coat, the one that costs more than everything she has ever owned, now serving as a blanket for a woman who collapsed on a laundromat floor with $5 in her pocket and a child's hand in hers. Emma sits beside her, 8 years old but somehow already understanding the weight of what has shifted, holding Sofia's hand and refusing to let go even when they arrive. 3 hours later, Sofia wakes in a bed that is larger than the bedroom of the Morrison house where she was born. The sheets are silk. Actual silk, not the polyester imitation she has slept on for decades. The room is all pale wooden floor-to-ceiling windows, and through those windows, Los Angeles spreads out below like a kingdom, white with snow, beautiful in the way that dangerous things are always beautiful. A woman in her 60s sits in a chair beside the bed, reading glasses perched on her nose, a clipboard resting across her lap. She has the kind of face that has seen suffering and decided not to look away. "Good morning," Dr. Reyes says. "You've been asleep for 17 hours. That's good. Your body needed the rest." Sofia tries to sit up and immediately understands that her ribs are not cooperating with this plan. She stops, breathing shallow. "You have 3 cracked ribs," Dr. Reyes continues, setting down her clipboard. "A concussion, severe bruising along your torso and throat, malnutrition indicating a deficit of approximately 2 weeks, dehydration, and several old injuries that have healed improperly. Broken arm that wasn't set correctly, old fractures along your left hand. You've been through something terrible. Multiple somethings. But your body is healing now. You will stay here until that process is complete." Sofia's voice comes out hoarse, fractured like old glass. "I can't pay for this. I have to leave. They're looking for me. If they know where I am." The door opens and Giovanni enters with Emma in his hand. Emma runs to the bed, stopping just short of the bandages and wires. "You're awake. Papa says you can live with us and be my nanny forever and ever. We have a library with more books than anyone in the whole world, and there's a kitchen, and you can teach me to cook, and Papa says." Giovanni places a hand gently on his daughter's shoulder. "Emma, give us one moment." Emma pouts but obeys, dropping into a chair in the corner with a book about constellations that she clearly intends to read while maintaining full visual access to Sofia. Giovanni sits in the chair beside the bed, his large frame somehow making the furniture look like dollhouse pieces. He leans forward, elbows on his knees, hands folded. He wears a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with scars and a watch that probably costs more than a luxury car. "My daughter is alive because of you," he says quietly. "You gave her your last $5 when you were bleeding and hunted. When you had every reason to save only yourself. That means something in my world. It means everything." Sofia stares at him, trying to understand the mechanics of a man like this. Where does kindness fit inside a body shaped by violence? "Why would you help me?" she whispers. "I'm nobody." The scar on his face seems to deepen as he frowns. "You saved my child when you had every reason to save only yourself. That makes you someone worth protecting. I have an offer for you, Sofia. You become Emma's full-time nanny. You live in this wing of the compound. You are paid $8,000 per month. In exchange, you are under my protection. No one touches you. No one finds you. You rebuild your life." Sofia's breath catches. She's done the math instantly in her head. It's a skill developed through years of survival. $8,000 a month is a mortgage, a future, a life where people eat food meant for people and not just whatever survives being discarded. "I can't pay you back," she says, and her voice breaks completely. "I have medical debt of $125,000. I have student loans. I have a final notice from a debt collector that arrived right before everything fell apart. I have nothing." Giovanni leans back in his chair. "The debt is already paid. I had my attorney settle your accounts this morning. $125,000. Consider it a signing bonus." Sofia starts crying then, not the quiet tears of someone grieving, but the ugly, heaving sobs of someone who has been carrying a boulder for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like to set it down. "Why?" she asks through the sobs. Giovanni stands and walks to the window. He looks out at the snow covering Los Angeles, at the city sprawling below like something alive and dangerous and capable of compassion only if you have enough money to buy it. Because 12 years ago, my younger brother Marco betrayed our family. He sold our shipping routes and client lists to the Volkov Syndicate for $2 million. It got 16 of my men killed in a coordinated ambush. I had to choose between mercy for my own blood or survival for everyone who depended on me. I chose survival. I chose to cut out my own brother from every part of my life and my business. He turns back to face her, and there is something broken in his expression that she recognizes because she sees it in the mirror every morning. It's a choice that still wakes me at 3 in the morning. But it taught me to recognize when someone is worth saving. You are worth saving, Sofia. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. The rain fell in sheets across Los Angeles, turning the streets into rivers of black glass. Sofia stood at the edge of the compound wall at 2 in the morning, her body shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The cold was the kind that seeps into bone and stays there, turning blood to ice water in the veins. Her clothes were soaked through. Her hair hung in wet ropes down her back. And in her trembling hand, she held a piece of paper that had somehow found its way into her pocket, the debt collector's letter, stamped final notice in red letters that looked like blood. The phone had buzzed 30 minutes earlier. A photograph of Emma at school, taken through the chain-link fence during recess. Her small daughter in her yellow jacket, unaware she was being watched. The text below the image read like a death sentence, "Tomorrow, or the girl pays for your mistakes." Sofia's breath came in gasps that weren't quite sobs yet, but were getting there. Her legs moved without her permission, carrying her toward the iron gate. One step. Then another. The compound behind her glowed warm and golden through the rain, all those windows lit against the darkness, all those people inside who had become her world in 3 months. Giovanni in his study, coordinating with Rocco and Dario, planning the strike that would end this. Emma upstairs in her 4-poster bed, her small hand wrapped around the stuffed rabbit Sofia had given her, the one with the embroidered flower on its chest. She reached the gate. Her hand found the cold metal. The thought came like a blade through her heart, everyone I touch dies or suffers. Michael died in the hospital bed because I couldn't pay for his surgery. The women in Hale's basement are still there because I ran instead of fighting. And now Emma is threatened because I dared to exist in this man's life. Maybe I should just go back. Maybe that's the only way to end this. Maybe if I disappear, Hale will forget Emma. Maybe if I surrender, if I let him take me back to that dark place, he'll let her live. Sofia's vision blurred. Rain and tears ran together down her face. Her hand was on the gate latch when she heard it, the smallest voice, calling from the house behind her. Sofia? Where are you going? She turned. Emma stood on the back porch in her pink pajamas, her rabbit tucked under one arm, her small face confused and afraid. The child's eyes were wide, searching for answers in the darkness. Sofia's knees buckled. She collapsed against the wet stone, her entire body folding in on itself. The rain hammered against her back like fists. All the weight she had been carrying, the debt, the fear, the guilt, the terrible belief that she was poison to everyone around her, came crashing down at once. "Baby, go back inside," Sofia whispered. "Please go back inside." But Emma didn't go inside. She ran across the wet grass in her bare feet, her rabbit dragging in the rain. She threw her small arms around Sofia's neck and held on like she was afraid Sofia might disappear if she let go. "Papa says you're family now," Emma said, her voice small and certain in the darkness. "Family doesn't leave." Those 7 words broke something so fundamental in Sofia's chest that she thought her ribs might splinter. She picked Emma up and carried her back through the rain, back toward the compound, back toward the light. The girl wrapped her arms around Sofia's neck and rested her wet head against her shoulder. Giovanni was in his office when they arrived, his laptop open, papers spread across his desk, his shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbows. He had been awake for 23 hours straight. There were coffee cups lined up like soldiers along the edge of his desk. The expression on his face when he saw them dripping wet and shaking was something Sofia would never forget. It was a man whose entire world had condensed into one moment. Sofia set Emma down gently. The girl ran to her father, and he scooped her up without hesitation, holding her against his chest as if she might disappear. Sofia met his eyes. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady for the first time in 3 months. "I'm done running. End them." Giovanni held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharply, and set Emma down. He made one phone call. His voice was quiet, each word measured and final. Now. At exactly 6 o'clock that morning, the sun was still an hour away from rising when 12 men in tactical gear moved through Los Angeles like smoke moving through water. They were trained, efficient, invisible until they weren't. Rocco led the first team to a nondescript warehouse near the Long Beach docks, a building so ordinary that thousands of cars passed it every day without seeing it. They knew what was inside: 7 women in a basement, chains on the walls, and Douglas Hale upstairs in his office counting money and planning shipments like a man counting heartbeats. The breach happened at dawn. Flashbangs lit the interior white-hot, smoke grenades filled the hallways with white clouds that turned everything into a nightmare version of reality. The doors came off their hinges. The windows shattered. Within 90 seconds, the building belonged to Giovanni Bianchi. Douglas Hale was dragged from his office, this man who had built an empire on the suffering of desperate women, this man who was 52 years old and aging in real time as he understood what was happening. He wore a suit that cost more than Sofia's annual salary. He wore gold rings on 3 fingers. He wore the expression of someone who had believed himself untouchable until the moment his untouchability ended. "Please," Hale begged, his voice breaking into a falsetto of terror. "I have money, I can pay whatever you want, I have." Rocco didn't speak. His face was stone. He zip-tied Hale's wrists and threw him into a black van with enough force that Hale's head hit the metal wall. The 7 women in the basement were freed by Dario's team, given water and blankets, told that they were safe now. Some of them cried. Some of them simply stared at the daylight like they were seeing it for the first time in years. Maybe they were. At the same moment 3 miles away, Dario's second team pulled up to Margaret Harrington's mansion in Bel Air. The house was white stone and soaring windows, the kind of place that screamed old money and older sins. Margaret answered the door in a silk robe the color of champagne, her hair in a perfect crown of gray curls, her face arranged into the expression of someone about to complain about an early morning delivery. She took one look at Dario and tried to slam the door. The door didn't close. Dario pushed through with the ease of someone moving through air, and 4 men in dark suits spread through her foyer like spilled water. Dario opened a manila folder and held it in front of her face. "The FBI will be at your door in 18 minutes, he said, his voice carrying the conversational tone of a man delivering the weather forecast. "This folder contains copies of every transaction between your charity foundation and Douglas Hale's trafficking operation. $47 million. All of it laundered. All of it documented. All of it already in the hands of federal prosecutors." Margaret's face went the color of old paper. Her hand shook so badly she couldn't hold onto her robe. "You can't do this. I have connections. I have lawyers." "I have?" "You had connections," Dario corrected. "Now you have a federal indictment." As his team turned to leave, FBI vehicles were already pulling up the driveway. For black SUVs. Agents with credentials and cold eyes. Margaret Harrington's careful world collapsed in the time it took to walk out her front door. Giovanni's flagship poker room sat on the 5th floor of a building on 5th Street in downtown Los Angeles. It was empty now except for him, Rocco, Dario, and Sofia. The room was all dark wood and green felt, with pendant lights hanging low over the tables, casting pools of gold in the shadows. The walls were lined with photographs of poker hands and famous games, a museum of calculated risks. Douglas Hale was thrown into a chair beneath one of those lights. His expensive suit was torn. One of his gold rings was missing. His face was the color of spoiled milk. He saw Sofia and something like recognition flashed across his features, not the recognition of a man seeing someone he knew, but the recognition of a man watching his own ruin take physical form. "You destroyed me!" Hale screamed at her. His voice cracked and fractured like breaking glass. "You destroyed everything." Sofia stood beside Giovanni, her hand resting lightly against his arm. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. There was something in her eyes now that hadn't been there 3 months ago, not hardness, but clarity. The understanding that she was no longer running. Giovanni's voice, when he spoke, was quiet enough that it took a moment for the words to register. He spoke like a man reading an obituary, with a kind of ritualistic finality. "You made 2 mistakes, Douglas. First, you hurt women who had nothing and nowhere else to turn. Second, you threatened a woman under my protection and my daughter. Those mistakes have consequences." Hale's chest heaved. Sweat poured down his face. "You're going to kill me? Then do it. Do it now." Giovanni shook his head slowly. "Death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful for what you are." He paused. "I'm giving you to the Volkov Syndicate. The Russians. 12 years ago, my brother betrayed me to them for $2 million. I had to make a choice between mercy and survival. They've been waiting for a gift worthy of settling that debt. You're it. They have very specific plans for men who traffic women." The blood drained from Hale's face so completely that for a moment Sofia thought he might die right there in the chair. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Then he started begging, incoherent, desperate pleas that poured out of him like a broken faucet. His strings were being cut one by one, and everyone in the room could hear them snapping. Rocco and Dario moved forward. They didn't drag Hale, they simply took his arms, and he stumbled forward like a man walking toward an execution. At the back of the room, a door opened. 3 men in Russian Mafia colors stood waiting. The world's coldest smile played across their faces. Hale's screams echoed down the alley behind the building. They were the kind of screams that belong in nightmares, in the spaces between sleep and waking. Then a van door slammed shut. The screams stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. "It's done," Rocco said quietly. News coverage of Margaret Harrington's arrest played on every screen in every newsroom in Southern California. The video showed her led from her mansion in handcuffs, photographers clustering around her like flies on a wound, their cameras flashing bright enough to turn day into strobe light. Her face was the face of a woman watching her entire identity dissolve in real time. 127 counts of money laundering. Conspiracy to traffic human beings. Racketeering. Fraud. Her charity foundation was dissolved within hours. Federal marshals seized her bank accounts, her real estate holdings, her jewelry collection. 40 years minimum in federal prison was the sentence her lawyers told her to expect. The charity galas that had once celebrated her name now covered the walls of scandal. Every society page that had praised her now ran exposés, how she had hidden in plain sight, how the money had always been blood money, how her foundation was built on the corpses of desperate women. Her fall was total. Public. Absolute. In the library of Giovanni's compound that evening, Sofia sat in a leather chair with Emma curled against her side, the girl's rabbit tucked between them. The fireplace crackled with heat. The rain had stopped, and through the windows, the city lights of Los Angeles stretched out like fallen stars. Giovanni stood in the doorway watching them. He had changed into clothes that fit his human side better than his criminal one, a dark sweater, simple slacks, his hair still damp from the shower. When he saw Sofia looking at him, he crossed the room and sat down beside them both. Emma was asleep. Her small hand held Sofia's. The stuffed rabbit's button eyes reflected the firelight. "She called you Mama this afternoon," Giovanni said quietly. "While you were in the shower. She said it like she was testing the word. Like she was making sure it was real." Sofia's throat tightened. "Giovanni." "I know," he said. "You're not her biological mother. But biology isn't what matters. You chose to stay. That's what makes someone a mother. He took Sofia's free hand. His palm was warm and scarred and steady. I need to tell you something, he continued. 3 months ago, I was a man living in shadow, making calculated moves, treating people like pieces on a chessboard. My own brother became a cautionary tale. My men feared me. My name meant danger. He paused. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. And then you came into my life soaking wet and bleeding, fighting for a child that wasn't yours because that's who you are. You taught me something I had forgotten. That strength isn't about how many guns you have or how many men will follow your orders. Real strength is about choosing to stay when the world gives you every reason to run. The firelight caught the small box he pulled from his pocket. It was velvet, the color of midnight. When he opened it, a diamond caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. Sofia Sinclair, I am not a good man. I probably never will be. But I am a man who loves you with everything I have, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you were right to trust me. Will you marry me? Sofia was crying and laughing at the same time, and in the chair beside them, Emma stirred and opened her eyes and whispered, "Say yes, Mama. Say yes." Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. The library was silent except for the soft crackle of the fireplace and the whisper of pages turning. Sofia sat curled in a leather chair near the window, a book open on her lap that she wasn't reading. Outside, Los Angeles glittered in the darkness, millions of lights stretching toward infinity. She had been awake for 3 hours, unable to sleep, her mind circling back to the warehouse in Long Beach where Douglas Hale had screamed until his voice broke. The door opened without a knock. Giovanni entered carrying 2 glasses of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the firelight like liquid gold. He was still dressed in his suit from the evening meeting, his jacket unbuttoned, his white shirt open at the collar. The scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone seemed deeper in the shadows. He handed her a glass. The whiskey was warm in her frozen hands. "You've been quiet since the poker room," Giovanni said, settling into the chair across from her. Not beside her. He was giving her space, the way he had learned to do these past months. Sofia looked up from the glass. "I keep thinking about that moment in the rain with Emma. How close I came to leaving. I was at the corner. My hand was on the fence. Another 5 seconds and I would have kept walking. But you didn't," Giovanni said. "Because a 5-year-old girl reminded me I was worth staying for." Sofia's voice wavered. "What does that say about me? That I needed a child to convince me my life had value?" Giovanni leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "It says you're human. It says you've been hurt so badly that you forgot your own worth. Survival does that. It strips you down to nothing and leaves you believing that nothing is all you deserve." He paused. The firelight caught the planes of his face, the scar tissue along his jaw. "But you chose differently. You saved Emma when you had $5 to your name. That wasn't desperation. That was courage." Sofia set down her glass with a small clink of crystal. "Why did you really save me, Giovanni? Not the version you tell people. Not the careful answer. The real one. The truth." The room fell silent. Outside, a car passed on the street below, its engine fading into distance. "When I cut my brother out of the family," Giovanni began slowly, his voice like thunder moving through distant mountains, "when I chose survival over mercy, I made a bargain with myself. I promised that if I ever saw mercy as the stronger choice, I would recognize it. I would be wise enough to change course." He stood and walked to the window, his silhouette sharp against the glittering city. "When I found you in that laundromat, beaten and bleeding, your last $5 crumpled in your fist, but still shielding Emma with your own body, I understood something. You had lost everything and still chose kindness. That's not common. That's not something you see in my world." He turned back to face her. "I saved you because you reminded me that I was still capable of recognizing strength when it didn't come from violence or power or fear. You showed me that real strength is in choosing to stay, choosing to protect, choosing to love when the world gives you every reason to run. Sofia's breath caught. She set down her book. I'm falling in love with you, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Giovanni crossed the space between them in 3 strides and knelt in front of her chair, his expensive suit pressing against the worn carpet. His hands took hers. They were warm and scarred and steady. I've been in love with you since the morning you stood in my office and argued with me about giving Emma extra reading time, he said, his eyes level with hers. You told me that her mind was hungry and I was starving it. You stood up to me. You saw past what I do to who I am. And you've rebuilt yourself into someone so strong that when you stood beside me in that poker room, you weren't a victim anymore. You were my equal. He kissed her then, gentle and certain, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise being made and kept simultaneously. 3 weeks later, Sofia moved from the guest wing into Giovanni's private quarters. The space was larger than her entire apartment had been, but what struck her most was not the size. It was the empty closet next to his, the space deliberately left for her, the message clear in its simplicity, I have been waiting for you. Emma celebrated the move by announcing to everyone in the compound that Sofia was now officially her mama. She said it in the dining room during breakfast, loud enough for Rocco and Dario and 12 other men in black suits to hear. Sofia is my mama now, Emma declared, her 6-year-old voice matter-of-fact. Because she stays. The room went absolutely still. Giovanni looked at Sofia across the table. Sofia looked at her eggs. Her eyes were full. Dario cleared his throat. Well, he said carefully, that's good then. Within days, Sofia's presence began reshaping the compound in subtle ways. She walked through the operations with the practical eye of someone who had survived the streets and saw what needed changing. She questioned why there were no female guards for school runs. She asked why the safe houses for trafficking survivors had no mental health resources. She suggested that the children of Giovanni's men needed education programs that didn't revolve around violence. Giovanni listened. More importantly, he acted. The safe house program expanded. Sofia recruited 3 other survivors and trained them to counsel newcomers. The education center opened in the East Wing, staffed by 2 teachers who worked exclusively with the children of his organization. Female guards appeared in the rotation, recommended by Sofia, approved by Giovanni, accepted by his men without question. Rocco and Dario stopped calling her Miss Sofia when Giovanni wasn't within earshot. They started calling her Boss Lady. It was a sign of respect that Sofia didn't ask for but understood completely. One evening in late spring, Giovanni found Sofia in the library reviewing security protocols. She was marking up a document, a pen in her hand, her face concentrated. What are you doing? He asked. The school pickup route is too predictable, she said without looking up. You vary it, but always within a 5-block radius. Anyone watching would know that within a week. She circled something on the map. What if you rotated between 3 completely different zones? The children get different scenery, the routine stays unpredictable, and any surveillance becomes exponentially harder to maintain. Giovanni read over her shoulder. The changes made perfect sense. He pulled a bank card from his pocket and set it in front of her. Your account, he said. $500,000 starting balance. You're not an employee anymore, Sofia. You're my partner. Sofia picked up the card slowly, as if it might shatter. In business? In everything, Giovanni said. She looked at the card. Then she looked at him. I had $5 3 months ago. I know. And now you're giving me $500,000. Because you've earned it, Giovanni said. Not through begging or luck. Through rebuilding yourself into someone too valuable to price. Sofia set down the card. I can't. You can, Giovanni interrupted. You already have. You just don't know it yet. 6 months later, on a summer afternoon with jasmine blooming across the compound gardens, Emma turned 6 years old for the first time with a family that would stay. The party was chaos in the best sense, a bouncy castle inflated in the lawn, tables laden with cake and fruit and juice boxes, 40 people moving across the grounds. The compound's gates were closed, the perimeter secured by men in black suits who stood at the edges smiling. The celebration spilled across the manicured grass like a garden party in a fortress, beauty thriving in the space between danger and safety. Sofia wore a simple blue dress. Her hair, no longer showing traces of chemical damage, fell past her shoulders in waves. She laughed as Emma tore open presents, books, mostly, because Emma had inherited Sofia's hunger for stories. Giovanni stood on the terrace with Rocco and Dario, watching the scene unfold below. "Never thought I'd see the day," Rocco said quietly. "You hosting a birthday party with a bouncy castle." "Life surprises you," Giovanni replied. "She changed everything," Dario observed. "It wasn't a question. She reminded me that power without purpose is just violence," Giovanni said. "She gave me purpose again." Sofia joined him on the terrace, slipping her hand into his. The gesture was natural now, easy, belonging. Emma ran toward them, her face flushed with joy. "Papa, Sofia, come see my cake." "It's a book." "A cake that looks like a book." They walked together toward the garden, toward the laughter and the sunlight and the life that had grown from a moment of crisis. Sofia looked up at Giovanni as they moved across the lawn. "I keep thinking about that night in the blizzard," she said. "If I'd walked past Emma. If I'd kept my $5 and kept walking." "But you didn't," Giovanni said. "No," Sofia agreed. "I didn't." "You chose to give everything you had to save someone who needed it," Giovanni continued. "That choice brought you here. To a home. To a family. To people who will protect you the way you protected Emma." Sofia stopped walking. She turned to face him, the summer light catching the gold in her eyes. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. Giovanni smiled. "Now you're stealing my lines." "I learned from the best," Sofia said, and they continued forward together, Emma's laughter pulling them toward the cake, toward the future, toward the life they had built in the space between danger and love. If this story moved your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember that their worth isn't determined by what they own but by what they're willing to give when they have nothing left. Subscribe because tomorrow's story will prove that redemption is always possible, even from the darkest places. Comment below, what would you do if you had only $5 remaining in this world? Your answer might surprise you. Remember this above all else, you are worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth staying for, even when you cannot see it yourself. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.